Who do you say that I am? How often over the past few months have you not recognized someone you know because that person was wearing a face mask, face covering? It's often hard to tell these days who people are behind the mask because the mask hides about 50% of the face. So if Jesus had a face mask on when he asked the question that we hear in the gospel today, maybe his apostles would have arrived at different answers. But with or without face covering, with or without a mask, identifying and answering the most important questions in life is continually necessary, and it's always evolving. When we see, we can just look into people's eyes in a different way now than with the mask on. So what do you think is the most important question in life? Kind of depends upon where we're at. So if you're very sick and contemplating major surgery, the most important question is, doctor, am I going to live? If you're a young man, head over heels in love, I suppose it's, will you marry me? If you're a student who just finished a pivotal exam, it's probably, did I pass the test? If you're on the Jenny Craig or Atkins diet, maybe the question is, how many carbs are in that appetizer? What's the most important question in life? So I came across this book a couple of weeks ago that just came out a few months ago, and it's by Timothy Cardinal Dolan, and it's entitled, Who Do You Say That I Am? Who do you say that I am? And he says that upon the answer to that most important question, everything else depends. Actually, Jesus really asked two questions. The first is, who do the crowds say that I am? So he asks, out of curiosity today, who does the world, public opinion polls, who does the culture, the society, the experts, other people, who do they all say I am? And that's, as we heard in the gospel, it's sort of easy to answer. Well, Lord, they think you're a nice guy, a loving leader, a marvelous teacher, a good model for us, a great religious figure ranking up there with Abraham and Moses and Mohammed and Confucius and Buddha. Some think you're a revolutionary, a healer, a reformer, a positive thinker, a giver. So see, I guess Jesus would have smiled. And then comes the most important question of all. Fine. That's who they think I am. But who do you think that I am? And it is upon that answer to that question hangs everything else. The direction of our lives, our attitude towards life, how we act, what we say, what we hope for, the salvation of our souls. Who do you say that I am? So, some people could reply, Lord, I've never really given too much thought to it, or haven't really thought too much about it lately. And when you think about it, that answer is sad and tragic, and perhaps hypocritical, since we might check the box marked Christian or Catholic when asked to designate our religion, or when we're at the Lord's Supper on Sunday morning. Or perhaps somebody could answer, Lord, I have different opinions, it's always evolving, and I haven't made up my mind again and again to think about it. I don't want to be closed-minded about other options, I want to keep my options open. That too is sad and tragic, an insult really, since he has, as a matter of fact, already revealed to us the answer to that pivotal question, and since we belong to a church that has cherished the reply to that question for 2 millennia. Well, finally, we can give the correct answer, the one that Peter gives. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. You are my Lord and Savior. You are the beginning and the end of my life. You are God from God, and light from light, and truth and begotten, not me. You're the most important person in my life. You're the one who knows me better than I know myself. You died for me. That's who you are, Jesus, my Lord and my God. There's the right answer. There's the act of faith. There's the reply of Peter and of the church founded on the rock of his faith. But then, for all of us, then we have to get ready, because the answer to that question has towering implications in our lives. How we live, what we say, what we choose, how we treat ourselves, how we treat others. And so every day, in a new way, in a fresh way, we have to ask ourselves that question anew. Who do you say that I am? Who is Jesus to me here and now, at this point in time in history? So that's the first message that this gospel passage, I think, gives to us this week to think about, that question. The second message, I think, is that we keep trying to answer that initial question in the context of being members of his church, of his body. Going back to Cardinal Dolan, not to this book, Who Do You Say That I Am, but to this week's edition of the Catholic New York paper, the paper of the Archdiocese. He asks this question in his weekly article. He says, is the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church going to survive? And he says that that's a question that many folks, both inside and outside Mother Church, are posing. And so in this article, he tells a little story. He goes on to say that a couple of weeks ago, he was enjoying breakfast with one of his favorite pastimes of eggs and sausage and pancakes at a local diner. And these big guys, so he's very specific about his food intake. So, and he says that next to him was a table of three men chatting over their corned beef hash and biscuits. But they were unaware that he was eavesdropping on their conversation. So that's what he says in this article here. I don't know how anybody can be unaware that the Cardinal Archbishop of New York is at the booth to you in the diner. He's not a little guy like Father Zach and I doubt he had the mask on while he was eating. Anyway, the Cardinal goes on to say that he hears one of the guys say, "No way can it survive. No way can it survive." And the guy goes on to say, folks have lost interest. The long suspension of activity made people figure they could get along without it. Nobody's interested in going back once it totally reopens, figuring that they can watch all the stuff at home. And besides, they're tired of the scandals and the money asking. So Cardinal Dolan says he uncharacteristically lost his appetite, because those guys were obviously answering the question, will the church survive, with a big no. But then he goes on to say, when the other fellas picked up the conversation, one guy commented and said, and it's a shame that the sport isn't going to make it, because the Yankees and Aaron Judge are off to a great start this year. All of a sudden, he rediscovers his appetite. They weren't talking about the church, they were talking about baseball. Nevertheless, the Cardinal goes on to say, the fact is, some people are saying about the church what those three guys were saying about baseball. It's not coming back. And I think this is where today's gospel reading comes in for all of us who are here because we want to be here, or here because of our relationship with Jesus. We're always answering that question, who do you say that I am? And sometimes we might wonder where everything is going. Where everything is going in our church, just as we might be saying the same thing about our country and our world. And so I think it's time for a deep breath and an act of faith. To ask, will the church survive, is an oxymoron. We have God's word, the most reliable guarantee there is that the church will indeed survive. It may look different, it may, as Pope Benedict once said, it may be smaller than what it used to be, but our Lord and Savior, the second person of the most blessed Trinity, gave us this promise: I am with you all days, even until the end of the world. And not even, as we hear today, not even the gates of hell can prevail against it. Cardinal Dolan says, though, unlike baseball, the church isn't a human proposition. For sure, that element, the human element, is mighty important. That's where saints are found, and that's where we sinners are found. But the church has a divine composition that assures us of its survival. The gates of hell shall not prevail against it, Jesus promises in this gospel, but that doesn't mean that hell will ever stop trying. So we've got all these issues, all these problems, the sorrow and the shackles of COVID-19. We've got declining church attendance, new allegations of abuse from decades ago every day from tort attorneys, one of whom chants that he will bring the church down. The closing of schools, the merging of parishes, kids and grandkids not practicing their faith, not enough priests or religious brothers or sisters, folks arguing about different church teachings, whether Pope Francis is too liberal or not enough, threats against religious freedom and the church's liberty to teach and serve. Wow, all of these issues, these problems, the gates of hell are at it full time. While we can never conclude that the church will survive, we can certainly wonder, how is it going to survive? So what invitations from Jesus can we hear from in the midst of all of this turmoil? What is he asking from us, faithful, maybe weary members of his church? Well, there's an old Latin phrase that applies: Ecclesia semper reformanda. The church is always indeed a reform. Ecclesia semper reformanda. Reform is always needed by her people, certainly by her leaders, by her structures, by her pastoral strategy, as we individually and collectively answer the question, who do you say that I am today, at this point in history, with everything going on, good times, good things and bad things? Jesus, of course, bids us not to tread water, but to cast out into the deep waters and to lower the nets, individually and collectively. And while the essentials of the church, as given by the Lord, cannot change, the way we live them, the way we pass them on to our children, the way we apply them, they can change in different ways. In every crisis, we can detect a whispered invitation to reform and to renewal, personally and collectively. That's always true of the church, and as Cardinal Dolan ends his article, renewal and reform might also save baseball. Our charge, our dream, our dare is to rebuild, to renew, to restore his church, our church, as we each seek to answer freshly and anew, who do you say, who do we say, who do I say that Jesus is? So with or without a mask, muting or hiding our voices, we affirm with St. Paul, as we hear in the second reading today, we affirm how deep are the riches and the wisdom and the knowledge of God, how unscrutable, how unsearchable his ways, for from him and through him and for him all things are. To him be glory forever and ever.